Came a knocking on my door one night around 6 o'clock. I had no invitation, nobody to job. I opened up the door and to my surprise, there was a bright and shining man with these piercing eyes. He said, "Sonny, you've been living your life with ease. Time to get back to work, son, get back on your feet." He left on that note without gloves or coat, even though the sky was gray. There came a knocking on my door, and I don't even know what for. After he left that night, I didn't think twice, didn't stress, didn't worry, didn't leave on a light, no. I thought it was a dream, cause there was no explanation why a man would show up to give me that brief exhortation. Thinking about the words that this man had said, started searching for some meaning as they raced around my head. Then I stopped with a start at the thought of repentance, and this is where I started to learn my lesson. So many ways, started working, started earning, got a job, making minimum wage. Now I praise the Lord for the life that he gave, for the pain and all the suffering, for my soul that he saved. Now I'm walking around, talking aloud, preaching the town. I don't know if they'll listen, but I won't step down now. Whoa, whoa, there came a knocking on my door. Wake up call for my life to begin. Thought I was doing fine, turns out I was drowning. Knocking on my door, knocking on my door. Oh, there came a knocking on my door. Knocking on my door, knocking on my door. Knocking on my door, knocking on my door.
Good day, gentlemen, and welcome to Fridays with the Fellas. Glad that you are here. Good morning, Keith and Henny and Ron. Okay. Glad to have you with us, Dominic. Glad you could join us. So today is Friday. That means we're talking manhood. That's what we do here on Fridays, and we are deriving a lot of our lessons on manhood from the book of Proverbs, a collection of writings, sayings from a wise man to his son. So today is the 12th day of May, year of our Lord Jesus, 2023. Now that's a very special day for me personally, because 100 years ago today, my father was born. Or it could be 101 years ago today that my father was born. My dad was known for many things, one of which was nobody knew for certain when his birthday was. If you know anything about how things were 100 years ago, the birth certificate for my dad. My dad was born in a small town in southern Missouri. If you've ever watched Little House on the Prairie, that's a pretty good picture of the setting that my dad grew up in. And the records were kept in a schoolhouse. So his birth certificate was in a schoolhouse. Well, that schoolhouse burned down. And with it, all of the records, and that included my dad's birth certificate. And so the only other documentation of his birth was an old family Bible, and it had 1920, and then they wrote in cursive, and the cursive numbers, those kind of squirrely numbers, or curly numbers, I should say, can be taken as a 2 or a 3. Well, when I was in my teen years, my dad got to retirement age. He decided he wanted to retire, and he said, "Oh, I'm 65. I can retire." That was the age then. And my mom said, "No, you're only 64." He said, "No, I'm not. I'm 65." And so they went back and forth and started asking my aunts and others, and nobody knew for sure. And anyway, I remember as a teenager, we drove down to the capital of Missouri, and he walked into the Social Security office and came out with a statement that he was born in 1922 and he retired. And so that's been fun for all of us. Well, anyway, I want to share some more of my dad's reputation, what he was known for, because it fits our text here this morning. But let's take a look at it. I said this morning, some of you it might be afternoon, huh? Hey, Anthony, glad you're with us. So here is Proverbs 10, 6 and 7. Blessings are on the head of the righteous. Okay? Blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the speech of the wicked conceals violence. And then verse 7, the memory or the name of the righteous is a blessing, but the name or the reputation of the wicked will rot. So, obviously, contrasting the righteous and the wicked here and some of the differences. So let's take the first one first. Blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the speech of the wicked conceals violence. The second part of that is pretty clear. There are wicked people in this world, but they don't come right out and tell you they're wicked. They don't just wear it out there and say, "Hey, here's my sign. I'm wicked. I'm evil. Don't trust me. Don't take me at my word." No, as the proverb here says, their speech conceals their violence. The thing is, it eventually does come out. If you know someone long enough, wait long enough, you'll see whether or not their actions match up to their words. And if they are wicked, then eventually that's going to be presented. It's going to be expressed some way. But their words actually conceal it. I don't know if I should use this as an example or not, but I'm going to. Think of a lot of our politicians. I don't know what's true of Bill and Hillary Clinton, and neither do you. But they have a reputation, among some at least, that they are responsible for the deaths of many, that their corruption runs deep. And you'll see the memes floating around. Epstein didn't kill himself. There's that one meme that you have seen where someone who maybe will expose the Clinton corruption. There's one meme that has Hillary calling suicide hotline saying she'd like to schedule an appointment for whoever this is that's going to expose them, and so on. You've seen all that stuff. Well, we may never know for sure whether that's true, but they had that reputation. And let's say that it is true. Some of it will come out, no doubt. And Ron says, "Is Jeffrey really dead?" Yeah, exactly. Those kind of questions persist out there, right? But let's just for the sake of this discussion, let's assume that some of the theories, call them conspiracy theories if you want to, that some of them are at least in the neighborhood of true. Do they just come out and tell us? No. Those of you who remember Bill Clinton when he was the president, one of the things that was so remarkable about him was he was an amazing communicator. So smooth. So you wanted to believe him. You wanted to take him at his word. But is he worth taking at his word? I don't know. There seems to be some evidence there. Dale says, that's funny. Doug, quote, "I'm not going to get political today." One cup of coffee later, here we go. Yeah, the point. Yes, that's fair. I'll receive that from you, Dale. The point is, using them sort of as a just an example of what may be true. The speech of the wicked conceals violence. They conceal it, they cover it, and then it comes out. And if you wait long enough, here it comes. On the other hand, the righteous are blessed, and the blessings are on their head. They're visible. So my dad, who I started talking about a moment ago, he was known for a lot of things. As I said, he was known for for not being sure of when he was born. He was also known for a lot of the funny things that he would say. In fact, my niece earlier this morning sent out a text thread to our family with a picture of my dad and said, what do you remember most? What are the Earlisms? His name was Earl Gooden. What are the Earlisms that you recall? By the way, he died in 2019, so it's been a few years now ago. And so my whole family started, weighing in on some of the funny things that he said. He would say things like, if you walked up to him and said, "Hi, Earl, how are you?" He would say something like, "Well, I was better, but I'm about over it." Or he'd walk up to you and say, "Well, I can see you're fine. How am I?" And if you were leaving our house, he might say something like, "Well, come back again and bring a ham or something you like to eat." and what he said the most often was, as we were leaving, "Glad you got to see me." One of my regrets in life is when we were discussing what to put on his tombstone. I threw out the idea we should put, "I'm glad you got to see me." And I didn't fight very hard for it. We were all sort of emotional and so on. But to this day, I regret that we didn't put that on his tombstone. That would have been perfect to go visit my dad and his grave and see on the tombstone, "Glad you got to see me." That was just a classic dad. But he was known even more so for being a good man, for being a righteous man. I remember years and years ago, a couple decades ago, when I would describe my dad to people and talk to people. At that time, he was in his 70s, and he had a few health problems along the way. And we would kind of talk about what was going to happen, what would it be like when my dad died. And I used to tell people, I don't think there is a funeral home big enough in St. Louis. That's where he lived. That's where I'm from. I don't think there's a funeral home big enough in St. Louis to hold all of the people that would come to my dad's funeral. As it turns out, in 2019, when he died, there was a funeral home big enough because he had outlived so many of the people that would have wanted to be there, whether it was family, friends, whatever. But he was a good man. He was a righteous man. People loved him. And at his funeral, they lined up person after person after person to express the impact he had had on their lives. Now think about it. This is a man that you've never heard of. Most of you. Might be one or two of you that on here that knew him, but most of you never heard of him. He didn't have a name out there in the broader world. He wasn't famous. But for the hundreds, maybe more, of people who did know him and who had a chance to interact with him, the legacy he leaves is a man who is righteous and good. The fear of the Lord was central to who he was. And that played out in how he lived his life. He was a righteous man. And not just in words, but in deed. And he was blessed. My dad was not an entrepreneur type. He worked hard, but he never made much money. I grew up in a very poor home. It was funny. We lived, by the time I came along, we lived in the rich part of the St. Louis area, the suburbs. But when my parents moved out there, it was out in the middle of nowhere. But everything moved that direction, and all the athletes, St. Louis Cardinals and blues players and others would build homes out in within a few miles of where I lived. And so here we were, this little bitty neighborhood in a very small house, extremely small by today's standards. And we always had hand-me-down everything. I didn't get new clothes, and oftentimes my Christmas gifts were hand-me-down Christmas gifts and that kind of thing. And we weren't well off financially, but we never lacked for anything. And when anybody heard that we had any need, they would just give my parents stuff because they loved him, because he had blessed them, because he had been such a huge impact on their lives. And I read a verse like this: blessings are on the head of the righteous. And I look back and think, I lived that growing up. Blessing after blessing after blessing after blessing, God poured on the head of my father through others because he was a righteous man. He was a good man. It's true. So, how about you? Do you see blessings that God is pouring out on you? Are others talking about you and your goodness, your righteousness, your pursuit of the things that please God? Closely related is this next verse, right? The blessing or the memory of the righteous is a blessing, but the reputation of the wicked will rot. Again, we take the negative first. We all know names, whether they're famous names or names of people who are in your circles of influence, but not so much outside of it. There are people, right? There are folks who died and their reputation is just rot. Their name is rot. You think of someone like Hitler being the Exhibit A, typically. Some of you were alive during the Watergate and Richard Nixon, and in my lifetime, certainly in recent years, I've heard differing accounts of just what was going on there, and then the CIA, some of that. Here, I get political again. Another cup of coffee. That's all right. We need to talk into politics too. Anyway, regardless of what is true and what really happened, Watergate and Richard Nixon, those are names that a lot of people don't want to be called. Benedict Arnold, right? You don't want to be called a Benedict Arnold because his reputation as a traitor continues, and others are that way as well. That's what happens. Wickedness gets exposed. Any of our own politicians who are wicked, truly wicked today, it'll come out, and then we'll look back and use their names as a rotten word. But here he says the memory of the righteous, or the name, literally, the name of the righteous is a blessing. The reputation of the righteous succeeds them. Your reputation, brothers, will succeed you. What are your grandkids going to say about you? So on this text that I'm talking about with my family, my nieces and nephews, who would be my dad's grandchildren, they have great memories of my dad. The funny things that he said, I talked about, and how old was he really? But he was a good, kind, righteous man. Yeah, Ron says one can always become a Chuck Colson. Absolutely. And that name, right, will succeed him. We're not going to remember Chuck Colson for the bad things he did. We're going to remember him for repentance and for his turnaround toward righteousness. So yeah, it's a great example. How about you? What are your grandkids going to remember? Are your grandkids going to be able to recall the blessings that were heaped on your head by others? Because you were a good man, you were a righteous man? Are they going to look back at your name, not just in the sense of, you did good things to the grandkids? Certainly there are wicked grandpas treat their grandkids with flattery, give them money. That's not what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about kids who will look back at their grandparents and say, he was good. He was righteous. He lived the kind of life that I want to emulate. Others saw his righteousness And he was a blessing to others, and others heaped blessings on him. Ron says, I have 11 grandkids, and this is a good subject. Yeah, what are they going to remember about you? We want to be the kind of men who are blessed because of our righteousness, that God will heap righteousness on our head. Will heap blessing on our head because we're pursuing what is right. We want to be the kind of men that leave a name for our kids and grandkids, to look back and say, he feared the Lord. He pursued what was right and proper in the Lord's eyes. He was honest. He worked hard. He was generous. He exercised wisdom. That's one of the things we're doing here to talk about manhood and wisdom. We want to be these kinds of men and leave that reputation so that others, so our grandkids say, I want to be like Grandpa. He was wise. He used his time and his money and his resources well. How you doing on that path? We're all in different places here. Ron is well down the path of being a grandfather. Some of you aren't even married yet, don't have kids. And obviously, I'm just sort of arbitrarily grabbing the grandfather-grandkid idea. It's not in the text. Just thinking about my dad brought that on, and my nieces and nephews and my own kids talking about their grandfather. But you see the point. And I'm getting this from the memory, the name of the righteous is a blessing. Down the road, how are you doing? What are you on the path of having a name that people will talk about in generations to come in your own family? People who knew you, will they look back and say, he was a good man. He was a righteous man, and I can see how the Lord blessed him because he was pursuing the right things. Ron says, there's a story, testimony in the making, and this is a very inspiring and encouraging. That's the kind of men we want to be. The people we often hold in high esteem culturally are people who are successful in a celebrity sense, but that's not what we're after, right? My dad, again, is not known outside of our circles, my family and those in his immediate circles in his day. That's okay. We don't need to be celebrities. That's not what we're after. But to pass on to future generations of those who know us that we were righteous and good and pursued godliness, that matters. That's a good thing. And we need to encourage other men in this. We met last night, our home fellowship guys met, and we studied Proverbs, and we have a couple newer folks along, newer men, and they are hungry for this. They are eating this up. I don't know how many of these guys have said, we've never talked about this with anybody. Our parents, our pastors and elders, or other godly men, that we don't talk about pursuing righteousness. We don't talk about wealth. We don't talk about good work ethic. We don't talk about getting over our laziness, at least at the level that we're discussing here. It's all through the Proverbs. Like, being righteous and pursuing wisdom is life, and it brings health to the body. All these things we're talking about. Men, we need to talk about this with each other and with those who are younger than us, because we want the next generation of Christian men to be wise and righteous. And this is very practical. This is living life the way God designed it to be lived. Be hard workers. Be productive. Protect the things that you have been given. Be a ruler. Rule and subdue the earth, right? Take charge. Make decisions. Be decisive. Do what is right and create this name, this reputation of being righteous. and take a look around and see how God heaps blessing upon you through others as you pursue righteousness. It's a good thing to do and to be. So, whichever phase of life you are in, take a moment. Take some time today or this weekend and picture your grandsons with an opportunity to share his story, his memories of you. What do you want him to be saying? We talk about writing your own eulogy. If you could, write your eulogy and then live it out. That's kind of what we're talking about here. What kind of legacy, what kind of reputation are you leaving? It matters. It matters. And I hope that all of us will have grandsons, children down the road that will look back like I look back at my father and say he was a blessing. He was an example of someone who pursued righteousness. He was good. He loved others well because he loved the Lord. God blessed him, and his name is a blessing. May that be true of all of us. Think about it. Have a great weekend, and we will come back next Monday and continue with the book of Hebrews. Take care.